Welcome to your Phil Steele Plus tour with selections. Should have at least 6 free selections for you today. Get to them in a minute. As always, take a look through a little tour of Phil Steele Plus, let you know how to use it best. As you know, if you're an Inside the Press Box subscriber, you get Phil Steele Plus absolutely free. Make sure you use it. I use it to handicap. As you can tell, I've already started looking at next week's games. You got a big battle. Penn State at Ohio State next week. That should be a good one. Right now, Ohio State number 1 in the average game grade at 127.1. Penn State 109.4. That looks to be like Ohio State about a 21-point favorite according to average game grades right now. But we're not going to talk about next week. We're going to talk about this week. Got some games for you. And we'll start off with the FCS game. Nice 2-0 last week for the FCS. I've got 3 games to look at. One official play right now. See if I talk myself into another one being an official play. But the first game we're going to take a look at is Maine against Rhode Island. And once again, I am not an expert on FCS, to be honest with you, but they've done extremely well just because of using this site. And if you want to use the site, once again, if you want to get Phil Steele Plus, I always forget to bring this stuff up, so that's why I bring it up now. You can get Phil Steele Plus, college, which is FBS, FCS, and NFL. Get the rest of the season pass. Normally it's $69. Right now it's $44, but you type in the code word winners. It's yours for $39. That takes you through the Super Bowl. College, FCS, NFL, you can't beat that. $39. And if you want just the FCS, you got those FCS playoffs coming up. Price is $29, $24 with the code $19. And this gets you use of my Phil Steele Plus system through the rest of the year, through the Super Bowl. You just can't beat that. And I'll show you what all is involved with Phil Steele Plus. But once again, just go to the philsteele.com store. And when you go there, right here, Phil Steele Plus, click on it, type in the code word winners. These are your prices. $39 gets you all 3. $19 gets you FCS only. And by the way, for the FCS playoffs, we will have all of the FCS playoff teams' individual stats updated for the season. So that's going to be pretty doggone exciting. Now, I don't know the conferences, so I always put them in alphabetical order here, which is quick and easy. We're going to put Rhode Island on the left because they are the road team this week. The Rhode Island Rams, Jim Fleming, 6th year. They're at Rhode Island. We're going to put Maine on the right. Maine's a team I've followed for years on the FCS. I actually did a weekly radio show up in Maine, so I would look and see how they were doing each week. They've always had a really good defense. 317 yards per game here, 335 here, 313 here. This year they're giving up 362, a little higher than normal, but they've had a couple of games. You see these 3 games here where they're playing the type of defense that I associate with Maine. I always associate the Black Bears with a really good defense. And this year they're playing some pretty good offense as well. Now, Maine's a 15-point favorite over Rhode Island. Last year, Maine was in the playoff. They got beaten by Eastern Washington, but they had been playing really good. They advanced pretty deep into the playoff, and then they lost on the red turf at Eastern Washington, which a lot of teams did last year. But if we take a look at a couple of similar things here, and this is the reason I like Maine minus the 15 this week, look at their last 3 games. They beat William and Mary by 11. We go take a look at what Rhode Island did against William and Mary. They lost to them by 36 points. So right there, that's a pretty big difference, 47-point difference. Maine beat Albany by 16. These guys lost to Albany by 7. That's a 23-point difference. And Maine beat Elon by 14. They lost to Elon by 25. That right there's a 39-point difference. So you add those up, what is that, 62, 109. 109 divided by 3 will get you 30. And then another 19 will get you 6. 36 points per game is the difference between the two. So that's saying Maine's pretty much a better team. If you go and look at the last 4 weeks' average game grade, Rhode Island is playing to a 55 level. Maine is playing to a 76 level. So that says that they're 21 points better and in the home field and that's going to take them up to a 24-point edge. My computer has Maine winning this 47-25, which is 22 points. It's got them with a 560 to 354 yard edge. And if you look at Maine's losses for the year, they lost to Georgia Southern, an FBS school. They lost to a Liberty. Now, Liberty's FBS, new to the FBS, but they're playing pretty well. Gave BYU a good game last week. Those are two of their losses. Towson, who they lost to, is number 20 in the FCS. Villanova, who they lost to, is number 16 in the FCS. And Richmond, who they lost to, is number 37. And while it was a 2-5 start, they have a first-year head coach this year in Nick Charlton. What they did back here in the Richmond game is they switched quarterbacks. Second half of the game, they went to a freshman quarterback in Joe Fagano. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. And over the last four games, if you take a look, 572, 439, 426, 429, they're averaging 467 yards per game. I like what Fagano's doing at the quarterback spot. He's hitting 68% of his passes. He's got a 14-3 ratio, so you can see that's probably one of the reasons for their resurgence here for Maine, and they've been playing better. And this is when you got a first-year head coach, now the team is starting to buy in. They can still finish the season with 7 wins this year, which would make it a good year for them. They've got Rhode Island, New Hampshire coming up. I think that they've got a little bit of enthusiasm. And meanwhile, Rhode Island's numbers, as I pointed out, by the last 4 weeks, sort of regressing over the last span, and they ended up losing to those teams as they did. So I think you have a team going in one direction, much like we had last week, a couple of teams like that. And we've got Rhode Island. Well, another thing is Rhode Island, look at their rush defense, giving up 238 yards per game, 6.0 yards per carry. Maine should be able to establish the run and then unleash Fagano with the play-action passes. And I think that's going to really help them here. So, and also another player to watch this week is Emmanuel Reed. Emmanuel Reed's a Buffalo transfer. If we go back to the team pages, we're going to click on Buffalo. And Emmanuel Reed here rushed for 371 for Buffalo, 4.5 yards per carry. Back in 2017, he rushed for 840 yards, 4.7. So you got yourself a pretty good running back to take advantage of this weak rush defense. And another player to watch in this game that I was looking at is if you go to Maine once again and look at, let's go click on Maine here. Last year, their top receiver was Ernest Edwards. He averaged 15.8 yards per catch. He has been a game breaker this year. Now, we don't have his individual stats updated up here, but I went and looked it up. Ernest Edwards has 979 yards receiving, 24.4 yards per catch. So they've got the guy that can run the ball. They've got the quarterback. They've got the receiver. Probably have the better defense as well. Add it all up. I like Maine, minus a 15 over Rhode Island. I think it's a little underrated. I think they win this game by 24. So we're taking Maine minus 15 as an official play. Now, you know, last week I threw out 2 teams to you, Eastern Washington against Idaho State. And I pointed out that Eastern Washington is actually starting to play a lot better football right down here. They were a playoff team last year. They've got Barrier back at QB. He's playing well. And if you look at Eastern Washington in the last 4 weeks, they are plus 176 yards per game. So they're playing their best ball of the year. Crushed Northern Colorado. They did lose to Montana, but then beat Northern Arizona, Idaho State. Playing a lot better down the stretch. They've got their outstanding quarterback playing well. And they're taking on Cal Poly this week. And Cal Poly is a team that's struggling a little bit down the stretch. Now, Cal Poly's an option team, as you could tell. Look at the amount of times they throw the ball. Look at the amount of times they run it. Only 202 yards offense against a very good Sacramento State, but then only 242 yards offense against Idaho State. And then your question is, how does Eastern Washington match up against Cal Poly? Well, they played them last year and beat them 70-17. And this week, if you look, Eastern Washington's only an 11-point favorite over Cal Poly. My computer's got them winning by 18 with a 574 to 370 yard edge. And if you look at the last 4 weeks, Cal Poly is minus 147 yards per game. Eastern Washington's plus 176 yards per game. A little concerned about the option, but look at how Cal Poly's rush defense is doing. They're giving up 5.6 yards per carry, 64% completions, giving opponents over the last 4 weeks 55 yards above their season average. Look at their offense the last 2 weeks, 706 and 689 yards. Their offense 202, 242. So Eastern Washington looks pretty good this week at Cal Poly, minus 11. I'll let you know if I'm going to use that as an official play. I'm still weighing it right now. We got 6th place. I may toss that one in as a 7th because I do like the way Eastern Washington's headed in the upper direction, and Cal Poly has been struggling. I don't like the way they matched up against Cal Poly last year in that game. And then the other one, last week I gave you Southern Illinois minus the 17.5 against Missouri State, and they won that game for us. Then once again, this is a Southern Illinois team that's surging. And as pointed out, a lot of times these losing teams in the FCS turn into winning teams. That's what they're doing. They're 6-4 so far this year. They got 2 games to go, and they're playing. Last week they played Missouri State. And I want to show you one comparison here. Here is Missouri State. And Missouri State has 1 win. So that was the thing where I said, hey, Southern's surging. We got a good team at the top taking on a bad team. They won 37-14. And the good news was they were only laying 17.5. So it was a nice cover for that one. Let's compare this Missouri State team with who Southern Illinois is playing this week. They're playing Western Illinois. And Western Illinois, if we take a look at them here, Western has just 1 win this year. Missouri State beat Western Illinois. And last week they were laying 17.5 to Missouri State. This week they're laying 13.5 to Western Illinois. Now, Western Illinois is at home. I really should have had them on the right, but let's go take a look at Southern Illinois again here. And Southern Illinois surging a little bit. How'd they do last year? Now, they did lose to Western Illinois last year, 34-31. I think they lost to Western Illinois the year before. At Western Illinois, they lost 28-24, and they beat Western Illinois by 10 here. So Western's given them some problems. It's a rivalry game, which is the reason I didn't make it an official play. But I think when you look at it, you see the fact that Missouri State actually beat this Western Illinois team. I used Southern Illinois laying more points last week. Granted, we were at home minus 17.5. This year they're minus 13.5. My computer's got them winning 37-20. They are playing with legitimate revenge. And, I think when you compare Missouri State and Western Illinois and see how Southern Illinois is playing, I still like Southern Illinois this week. That's not an official play. You know what? I'm going to lock in Eastern Washington as an official play, minus the 11 against Cal Poly. That'll give us 7 selections this week. So let's lock in Eastern Washington, but keep your eyes on Southern Illinois. They should be able to cover minus the 13.5 against Western Illinois as well. And the good thing here is, like I said, I just showed you with Southern Illinois, you can go back and look and see how Southern Illinois has done since 2011. Color-coded red and green. Get a real good feel for the team. We'll have the individual players updated. We've got the average game grades. If you look at the average game grades, they come in at a 79.7 over the last 4 weeks. Western Illinois is playing at a 54.1. So even with the home edge, that's 57. You'll talk about 22-point difference. Southern Illinois still looks like a pretty good play there. All right, so official plays, Maine minus 15, Eastern Washington minus 11. Let's go take a look at the NFL now, see what we got on these NFL pages. And, I think it's a tremendous value. We're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions against Dallas. Dallas is on the road, laying about anywhere from 4.5 to 6 in this game. But I think when you take a look at the two teams statistically, there really is no comparison. I mean, let's go click on Detroit over here. You see, the Dallas Cowboys are outgaining their opponents by 114 yards per game. That's one of the best marks in the NFL. Detroit's being outgained by 15 yards per game this year. So Dallas, even last week in that loss to Minnesota, had a 443, 364-yard edge. And that's a pretty good Minnesota team. They outgained Philadelphia by 119 yards. That's a good game. They outgained the Green Bay Packers by 228 yards, but somehow lost that game, 32 first downs. So they've got a nice balanced offense. They can run the ball with Elliott. They've got Prescott. They've got Cooper. Meanwhile, Detroit has been struggling. They do not have a balanced offense, cannot run the ball. Look at all the red there. And Matt Stafford, of course, missed last week's game. He's questionable for this one. If you go back to the NFL, I brought this up on the Wednesday tape, and I do want to remind you, the Wednesday tape has got great stuff as well. Go take the Phil Steele Plus tour for Wednesday. It's got a couple of free selections up there for you. A lot of great news and notes that I put up there as I go through the games for the week. So do make sure you check that out. But anyway, on that tour, and also when you go to YouTube, please subscribe. This keeps this stuff free. I'm giving this stuff to you for free. Naturally, if you subscribe, give me a like, share it, all those things. Give me a comment down here what you'd like to see. We'll put that stuff up there, and it keeps the thing free. So please subscribe and hit the bell. We'll notify you when the new videos are up. I give you 2 each week. A lot of great information. stuff that I'm just working on football, guys. I don't care about any other sport. And as I go through every matchup of every game, if I make an interesting note, I say, hey, I'm going to put that on my news and notes or the Phil Steele Plus tour. So do make sure you check that Wednesday one out. Got a couple of free plays up there for you on that. But when we go to the homepage here, we click on the NFL. And in the NFL info, you've got the offensive, defensive YPG. Dallas is number 2 in the NFL at plus 80 yards per game above their opponent averages. Detroit's all the way down here at minus 26.1. Now, they just lost to Chicago last week, a minus 73.6 team. I think Dallas is an underrated team with their record right now, and I like the Cowboys to go on the road and beat Detroit. Like I said, the spread's anywhere from 4.5 to 6.5 right now. Detroit's quarterback is questionable. I just like Dallas in this one. Go ahead and lay the points with Dallas in that one. So we're taking the Dallas Cowboys over Detroit. And once again, the NFL team pages, when you look at them, you get your individual player stats are updated right here. You can see who's doing what. Elliott only had 47 yards last week after getting 3 straight 100-yard games. That's great if you play fantasy football. You can follow along there, see how they do against different opponents. That's all updated for you. The red and the green are updated. The opponent averages are updated for the NFL each week. And the NFL also takes you all the way back. You can go all the way back here. And plus, when you want to click on a opponent, like let's take a look at Dallas and Detroit this week. How have they matched up against each other? You just click on the opponent. Dallas has won the last 2, 42-21, 26-24. This tells you how the home team did, much like with the college. The word win means if the home team won straight up. The color, as you can tell here, the home team has not covered 3 of the last 4. So the visitors actually 3-1 against the spread the last 4 at home. That's available on every single team as well for the NFL. All right, let's move on to college football. FCS got 4 selections for you. And we're going to click on our FBS page here. Take a look at the Indiana Hoosiers this week. And we're going to click on our FBS page here. And we're going to click on Penn State. Now, Penn State in a big letdown. So, you're talking about a sandwich. Last week was 8-0 versus 8-0, where they take on Minnesota. Came up short. Played a good game. They had 518 yards. The turnovers were crucial. Next week, they got Ohio State. Now, Penn State, even though they lost last week, if they beat Ohio State and beat Rutgers and beat Indiana this week, but if they beat Ohio State next week, they win the East. They go back to the Big Ten title game. They could get the revenge against Minnesota or maybe beat a Wisconsin. They still can make the playoff. A one-loss Penn State will make the playoff. So they still have that stuff alive. But a lot rides on next week's game against Ohio State, which, by the way, I was just looking at that matchup. Huge matchup next week. Huge matchup last week. This week, by the way, we're playing Indiana. And Indiana, if we click on this last game, they played them pretty tight. 33-28 last year. They did blow them out at home 2 years ago. That was an Indiana team it's an Indiana team that usually plays the big boys tough, but can never break through. Well, this year they're starting to break through. They're winning some of those big games. So I like that factor as well. And when you look at this matchup, the things I want to take a look at, Penn State in a massive sandwich game. Let's take a look at how Penn State does off a loss. You would think they bounce back big. Well, in the last 2 years, they've lost to Ohio State, and then they lost to Michigan State. Lost to Ohio State, lost to Michigan State. James Franklin actually 4-14 against the spread off a loss. So they have a tough time covering the games after a loss. And how about Indiana? While Penn State's in a massive sandwich this week, Indiana's fresh off a bye. They had a bye last week. I thought they might be in trouble here against Northwestern, coming off a huge win. They clinch a bowl. They're at home. Northwestern's a great dog. No, they just crushed them, 34-3. This is a very good Indiana team. Look at this defense. You probably don't realize this, but Indiana's defense giving up just 310 yards per game this year. They've got Stevie Scott at running back. I like the way this guy runs the football. And while Michael Penix is out, Peyton Ramsey's hitting 72% with a 9-3 ratio. And watch this guy here, Whop Philyaw. You probably don't even know the name, but Whop Philyaw is having a hell of a year, 813 yards. So they've got the run game, they've got the quarterback, they've got the receiver, and they've got the defense. They're holding opponents to 45 yards per game, below their season average this year. They played the big boys tough. They're 4-0 against the spread as an away dog right now. So they do well in that situation. A lot of good. Well, they did lose at Ohio State. Did not cover that game, but 4-1 against the spread as an away dog, I should say. So they play the big boys tough. They're plus 194 yards per game the last 4 weeks. How about Penn State? They're actually minus 25 yards per game the last 4 weeks. And if you look at the last 4 weeks' grades, Penn State's playing at a 105.4 level. Indiana at a 102.6 level. So if you base it strictly on numbers, Penn State should be about a 6-point favorite. They're laying over 2 touchdowns. It's 14.5. Then throw the situation in there. Indy off a bye, Penn State in a sandwich. I like Indy, plus the 14.5 over Penn State. Lock it in. It's a sandwich play this week. All right, let's take a look at another game. It's in the ACC. And you know what, guys? I gave you Boston College over Syracuse, remember on here? Watch that game. Boston College just absolutely obliterated Syracuse. How can you pick Syracuse? They are a team that's going nowhere. They got absolutely obliterated by Boston College, and we used them, and we enjoyed that, didn't we? 691 yards for BC, 496 yards on the ground, 7.6 yards per carry. They only hit 8 out of 10 passes, 195 yards. Absolutely obliterated them. Click here. You can see the score was 44-20, 51-20, 58-27. I enjoyed that game a lot. But you can't get that out of your head, can you? You think Syracuse is an absolutely horrible football team. But I think Syracuse has a shot covering this week against Duke. And here's why. First of all, Duke is not a great home favorite. Last year, there was a couple of games where I had picked Duke higher in the magazine. I needed them to win some games. And all I needed them to do is win at home in a couple of games. They played Wake Forest at home. They got absolutely drilled, 59-7. They played Virginia at home. They lost 28-14. They lost to Virginia Tech at home, 31-14. Favorite in all those games. And so Duke is 2-7 against the spread as a home favorite, and they've lost 5 of them outright. Now, Dino Babers is an emotional coach. Remember they upset Clemson? So he can get his team prepped. He can convince them it's us against the world. And guess what? They still have a shot at bowl eligibility, and he will convince his team that. They are 3-6, but if they beat Duke, beat Louisville, beat Wake Forest, they can still get to a bowl. And he's a good motivator. I think he'll have his team fired up, off a bye. So he'll have them convinced that they can still get to a bowl game. So as bad as they looked last week, let's take a look at another stat here. I pointed out that Penn State-Duke stat. Well, Syracuse is minus 115 yards per game the last 4 weeks. Duke's minus 110. So you're talking about two teams that are playing at about the same level. Duke's not a good home favorite. Babers is a master motivator. Syracuse did only lose to Pitt by 7. They only lost to NC State on the road by 6, so they can play some teams tough. They beat a pretty good Western Michigan team, 52-23 as well. Liberty's playing well this year. They beat them 24-0. So as bad as Syracuse looked in their last game, and that's the reason they're getting double digits here against Duke, I'm going to take Syracuse plus the double digits over Duke. Possible upset. The numbers say Duke should be probably more like a 6 or 7 point favorite. In fact, when you go to Press Box, I got 2 pages for you on my Inside the Press Box play here to take a look at. Here is what you get with Inside the Press Box. This tells you what the offenses and defenses that they faced. This gives you a complete statistical breakdown here. This gives you individual leaders. But remember, I think next year with Inside the Press Box, since you get Phil Steele Plus for free, we're probably going to do away with these individual leaders here, make this more about the information for this week, and maybe a little bigger, easier to read as well. And then you click down here, and this is what you get on every game. So as you can see, the computer's it does have Duke winning at 31-21, but I don't think it captures Duke as a poor home favorite. Syracuse is a good motivator. The yards are fairly close, 414 to 305. And here's my forecast on the game. I tell you all the information I got going on the game here, give you a complete write-up, and then I give you the final score. So I've got Duke winning it by 7. It's a double-digit favorite, and I think Syracuse might even have a shot at the outright upset here. By the way, if you would like to get Inside the Press Box, we do have a great deal for you right now. Inside the Press Box, if you enter the code word STEEL19, you can go to InsideThePressBox.com or PhilSteele.com and order. Inside the Press Box, college and pro through the Super Bowl, just $139 with the code STEEL19. That's $20 off. If you want the rest of college, you get this week, next week. There's 4 weeks left of college football, including that final week of the final week where they have the championship games. $49. Now it's $20 an issue, so you're saving big money there. NFL the rest of the year, $69 for the regular season, but this takes you through the Super Bowl, including all the bowls, just $139 if you enter the code word STEEL19. So make sure you do that. That's probably your best deal there. But if you want just the college for the rest of the year, $49, you can't beat that. And this week, again, I've got 8 best bets up there for you. 8 best bets on InsideThePressBox.com. So make sure you check that out. Enter the code word STEEL19. All right, let's take a look at another game. Georgia Southern against ULM. Now, I mentioned on the Wednesday one, ULM caught a big break last week when Georgia State's quarterback, Dan Ellington, went out. With Dan Ellington, they had 24 points on 5 possessions. With a backup quarterback who's more of a pocket passer and not as good a thrower as Ellington, definitely not the running threat that Ellington is, they had 7 points on 7 possessions, and ULM came out on top. They won by 14 because, and I mentioned it once again on the Wednesday tape, Sean Elliott actually went for it on 4th and 8 with 5 minutes to go in his own 28 and basically gave them an extra touchdown. So I think ULM comes in a little overrated at this point and benefited from a couple of big breaks to win that game by 14 last week. Georgia Southern's off a loss to Troy. Now, they outplayed App State top to bottom. You click on the box score over here. You can see they led that thing 24-7, absolutely dominated App State on the road. So this is a very capable Georgia Southern team. Now, a lot of time, a team off a big win like that, everybody's patting them on the back. They've got Sun Belt all captured. They were flat last week. They went into Troy and got thumped, 603-333. Couldn't handle the prosperity. Well, they're coming back. They're at home against ULM. This is still a really good team, one that can run the football. And look at the green over here. They are a good running team. Sunbelt play, or overall, they're averaging 4.9 yards per carry. ULM gives up the rush yards. You know me. I like the green over here, the red on the rush defense. They're giving up 5.9 yards per carry. Wow. So if Georgia Southern can run the football, they're going to be successful. I'm thinking Georgia Southern can run the football, guys. 255 yards per game, 5.9. Once again, Dan Ellington was running the ball on them. They said 24 points on 5 possessions. They probably would have 48 points last week, Georgia State, if not more, because he got injured in the second quarter. So you're looking at, I like the matchup, green versus red. I like the fact that if this game was played last week, Georgia Southern would probably be a 14-point favorite because ULM would be coming off this 7-point home loss and traveling. Georgia Southern was off this impressive win and at home. But instead, Georgia Southern, because they were off that big win, lost to Troy, and ULM, because Dan Ellington got injured and Sean Elliott made a questionable call at the end of the game, they won by 14. Now the spread's 6.5. You're not even laying a touchdown. So you got the solid run game against a weak run defense. You got a lot of things that happened last week that have brought this number way down, way down. And one thing I also wanted to point out, it was interesting when I was looking at Georgia State's rush offense. LSU and Minnesota. Those two teams have lost a combined 0 games this year. That's who they were losing to in the non-conference slate. And now, as you see, they're back to playing conference football. I got a lot of green going on. So I like that as well. Well, it would have been a 2-touchdown spread. It's now 6.5. I like Georgia Southern minus 6.5 over ULM in this game. Let's wrap it up with one more. Before I get to your final play, I pointed this out on Twitter, but if you don't... Oh, by the way... we'll get to the Twitter thing in a minute, but the one thing I found interesting, I always like to put the visitor on the left. And Ohio State is the visitor this week. They're traveling to Rutgers. They're about a 50-point favorite. And you're probably wondering, what the heck, 50 points in a Big Ten game? But here's an interesting stat. Look at this. Rutgers in conference play is averaging 188 yards per game, 4 points per game. Okay? They're going against an Ohio State defense that in conference play is holding opponents 183 yards below their average. Well, if they hold them 183 yards below their average, Rutgers gains 5 yards in this game. So that's why the spread's up there in the 50s for this one, because you got to figure Ohio State's defense, which has not shown a let-up all year, will absolutely dominate a Rutgers team. They can't move the ball in Big Ten play. How about that? To me, just watching this game, I want to see how many yards Rutgers gains, because that's a fascinating number. They hold their opponents 183 yards below their average. They gain 188. Now, Ohio State is allowing 217 yards per game, and Rutgers gains 169 below their average. So that right there says Rutgers gains 48. If you add 48 and 5, you get 53. Divide that by 2. You're looking at 26.5 yards for the game. So let's put an over-under at 50 yards for Rutgers. Over or under, the numbers say here that they get less than 50 yards. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens there. But let's take a look at your last game. And it's Arkansas State and Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina has got to travel to Arkansas State, so we're going to put them on the left, Arkansas State on the right. And I do want to point out that right here, when you go to Twitter, I update stuff all season long up here. All the latest injuries are up here. And take a look here. Coastal Carolina, injuries have exposed these two Chanticleer deficiencies in 2019. Only one DB from opening day available this week. That's up there. I've got this guy's out for the year. This freshman quarterback might start playing. You know that freshman rule where you can play 4 games? Why not get him in there? Will Brandon Batiste be able to return here for ULM? I think he will. Take a look at different things that are up here. All the injuries are updated. And, you know, as I mentioned, if you want to know who's going to be Vanderbilt's quarterback, Ole Miss receiver, 2 guys left. Will Kelly Bryant play? Yes, he's expected to be back. I update you on that. So if you want to know the latest in injuries, here's last night's win probability, by the way. Kent State appeared headed for a loss. They ended up actually winning the game against Buffalo. That was a pretty exciting game last night. Incredible comeback. Down 24-6. They rally and get a 44-yard field goal at 0-0 to win 30-27. Irish might end their sellout streak. If it's interesting, I post it up here. So follow me on Twitter, at PhilSteele042. Check it out every day. If you're wondering about the latest injury, I give you the complete article written about the game. You can really become an expert. So we know Coastal Carolina's banged up in the secondary, and look at the red they're giving up here. Arkansas State's got a hell of a pass attack. I mean, they've got Omar Bayless, who's a Blitnikoff contender. He's averaging 17.7 yards per game, 13 touchdowns. They've got Kirk Merritt. They've got Jonathan Adams. And even though they lost their quarterback, Logan Bonner, Hatcher's hitting 69% with a 14-7 ratio thrown to these receivers. They've got the run game. Murray's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. And this is an offense that's pretty much humming along. 437. Conference play, 466 yards per game. So I think Arkansas State gets their yards, gets their points in this one, taking on a banged-up secondary. If you look at them, the last 3 games, they played Georgia Southern and South Alabama. They're still not bowl eligible yet, so they need to win. Coastal's defense a little banged up. I do think that Jamie Chadwell is doing a hell of a job with Coastal Carolina this year. But I'm going to take that matchup, that Arkansas State receiving core against a banged-up DBs, and take Arkansas State minus the 12.5 over Coastal Carolina. Do appreciate you watching. Once again, please subscribe, hit the bell, and also watch the Wednesday news and notes. I'll be back with you next week. Last week, the plays went 6-2-1. Hopefully, we can have another week like that this week. Just gave you 7 free plays. A lot of great football information. Have yourself a great weekend. Enjoy the football this week. 3 weeks of college football left after this one.